Galatians chapter 4. Before you Gentiles knew God, you were slaves to so-called gods that do not even exist. So now that you know God, or should I say, now that God knows you, why do you want to go back again and become slaves once more to the weak and useless spiritual principles of this world? You are trying to earn favor with God by observing certain days or months or seasons or years. I fear for you. Perhaps all my hard work with you was for nothing. Oh, my dear children, I feel as if I'm going through labor pains for you again, and they will continue until Christ is fully developed in your lives.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Today we're in between two teaching series. So we just ended the season of Easter, and next week we're going to begin what the church calls ordinary time, or kind of the year of the church. So this is a week between those two teaching series. So I thought I would use it to do a much overdue update on our building project. And then, like a lot of men, I made the decision to just do something on the calendar, and only after I decided to do that did I look at the calendar and realize, oh, it's Mother's Day. Shoot. Okay. Well, I'm not going to change my plans. So Mother's Day is typically the third most attended Sunday of the year for churches, outside of Christmas and Easter. I'll let you guess what the fourth most attended Sunday is. Hint, it's not Father's Day. Now, one of the many problems in Western culture is that moms seem to want their families to be together and to start their special day worshiping Jesus. Men seem to want to pretend like they don't have families and start their special day playing golf or fishing or doing anything other than being here. So thanks, moms, for wanting your day to begin here. I realize that you came probably not hoping to hear a message about our building project. And I appreciate that. You probably also don't want to spend the rest of your day after church watching youth sports. But many of you are going to do that anyway because very thoughtful men were put in charge of that scheduling and decided to schedule a triple header on Mother's Day because they assume you love it. So, in a similar fashion, as a thoughtful man, I'm going to talk about our building project this morning on Mother's Day, but I'm going to try to do it in a way that sort of bridges these themes a little bit. Okay. So most of you, if you've been in church for any length of time, you know that God is most typically referred to as Father, that the writers of Scripture, when referring to God, most typically use male pronouns, but God is often also referred to as Mother. You may not know that. Actually, the first time you meet God in the pages of the Scripture is as a creator. And the story says that God's Spirit, which in the Hebrew language is a feminine noun, that God's Spirit, feminine, is hovering or brooding over the waters of chaos, and then God speaks or brings forth, one might say, births creation into existence, being from non-being, existence from non-existence. So literally the first time you meet God, there are a lot of kind of maternal overtones to that passage. God, of course, is not just the mother of creation. The prophet Moses refers to God as the mother who gave birth to the people of Israel. And as you moms will appreciate, as the mother of Israel, God is described in different ways. Sometimes God as mother is nurturing and comforting. Sometimes God as mother is irritated that Israel won't grow up, like put his laundry away and make his bed, that kind of stuff. Actually, it's the prophet Hosea where we get the concept of mama bear. You may not know this. God is described by the prophet Hosea as being like a mother bear who's been robbed of her cubs. And in the context of that passage, the prophet is referring to foreign nations that have led the people of Israel astray. And from Hosea's perspective, God, like a mother bear, is going to tear them limb from limb. So some of you moms can appreciate how that feels sometimes. Even Jesus, who is God in the flesh, male flesh, mind you, refers to himself as a hen, a mother hen, who wants to gather all of his kids under his wings and protect them from evil forces. So both men and women are made in the image of God. Both men and women reflect the nature of God in unique ways. That is, ways that the other does not or cannot. So women reflect the image of God in ways that men do not and cannot. And it is in their role as mother where some of those unique qualities are often expressed most clearly and most powerfully. So God is referred to as Father, and we use male pronouns to refer to God, but God is also Mother. It's not just Mother or God where the mother label applies. It is also the church. Historically, the church is referred to as mother, and you see this metaphor in the New Testament quite often. A lot of times on the mouth of the Apostle Paul. You heard one example this morning in his letter to the Galatians. But Paul, and he's kind of representative of the church, he refers to himself in places as being like a nurturing mother who metaphorically is breastfeeding spiritual children, giving them the nourishment, the spiritual nourishment that they need and that they're capable of digesting so that they can grow up into spiritual maturity. And of course, we know that spiritual maturity means love. Is the fullness of charity. It wasn't until the 3rd century, though, a theologian named Saint Cyprian, he kind of communicated this metaphor of mother, I think, as clearly as you can. And this is what he said. He said, he cannot have God as his father who has not the church as his mother. He cannot have God as a father who has not the church as his mother. Here's what he means. Christianity is a received faith. You become a Christian when you hear the message about Jesus and you believe it. Right? To just borrow language that I used in our previous series, when you place your faith in the faithfulness of God, a faithfulness that you come to the knowledge of through the story of the life, death, and resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ. Well, it is the church that for 2,000 years has carried that story. Like a pregnant woman, it is the church that carries that story. And it is the church in all of its various arms. It is the church that in different times and places and cultures births or delivers that message to the world. I was able to start following Jesus because the church carried the message about Jesus and then delivered it to me. And then when I placed my faith in the faithfulness of God, it was the church, like a mother, that nurtured that faith in me into a kind of maturity. I'm still growing, but I'm a lot more mature today than I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So when St. Cyprian says he cannot have God as a father who has not the church as his mother, that's what he means. He means you can't come to a knowledge of God in your life, and you certainly cannot grow up into spiritual maturity if not for the church. The church is the mother of faith. The church carries what it calls the deposit of faith, the story about Jesus. It is the church that delivers that faith to the world, and it is the church that nurtures it into maturity in your life and in culture. Now, all of that, as those of you who are moms in the room who have gone through any of those seasons, you know none of that comes without pain. So carrying a human around inside your body for 40 weeks, although you all do it with amazing grace, I have been told, is not always real comfortable. That's not always a pleasure cruise. Until very recently, right? I mean, until the advent of modern anesthetic, no woman could give birth to a child except through excruciating pain. And as any parent will tell you, father or mother, the process of helping a human being grow up into maturity is really hard. It's long, and it is just fraught. There's no manual for it. It's long, and it's fraught with pain and suffering. Sure, some of our greatest joys are as parents. but also our greatest pains are often in that role. So when I talk about the church as mother, for 2,000 years, the church has faced and embraced the pain that is just built in, inherent in its role of carrying, birthing, and nurturing faith. The message you heard just a second ago, the scripture you heard, it's just one example. Paul's writing to the church in the city of Galatia, and he's effectively saying, in as maternal a way as I think he's capable, he's basically saying, guys, it's time to grow up. He says, I'm experiencing labor pains all over again. I mean, the Apostle Paul, if you know his writing, occasionally he just lists off for you all of the pain and the suffering that he had to endure in his life in order to carry the message about Jesus, in order to deliver it to people, and then in order to help them grow up in faith. He really is representative of the church in this regard. And this is just one of those examples where he's saying, this is hard. It's hard. Man, it cost me to come to you. It cost me to tell you the story. And it's like I'm experiencing labor pains all over again as I'm just waiting for you to grow up. It's like you just won't leave behind the world that God rescued you from and just fully step into this new world, this new life that God has given you. I mean, they had specific things they were dealing with. You know, you're trying to earn God's faith, you know, some of the text that you heard. But the overall point is you were living one way and you were operating according to certain principles that you just assumed were true and good and normal. God rescued you from that into a new life. And I've been trying to help you embrace that and grow up and let go of your old life. And it's just hard. It just takes a long time, right? Paul knew the pain of carrying and birthing and nurturing faith. Paul's a representative of the church. For 2,000 years, the church has embraced the pain of carrying, birthing, and nurturing faith in the world. Just like a mom. The church is the mother of faith. Now, I'm choosing to emphasize that aspect of motherhood because our church, right, our church here is part of the global church. So we share that maternal identity and we share that maternal legacy. For 25 years, our church has been here in Northwest Ohio embracing the pain of carrying, birthing, and nurturing faith into the world. And God willing, 25 years from now, we'll still be here doing the same when a lot of other churches won't be. But to get there, we've chosen as a church to make an investment in our building. And that comes with its own set of challenges and labor pains and struggles to see that through. We've embraced a lot of pain to get here, to get to this place. I just want to share with you that to see it through to the finish line, we're going to have to embrace a little more. So one of the things you're going to have to embrace is we're going to probably be in this building a little longer than we hoped. And some of you might be like, well, that's no surprise. I knew that was coming. We hoped to start construction on April 1st and be done by the end of the calendar year. We didn't have our construction permits done until like the third week of April. Again, that was entirely out of our hands. Our architect got them done, handed them to government agencies, and then you just sit and wait until you get the go-ahead. And that didn't happen until the end of April. So that kind of pushed our timeline back a little bit. And then we decided as a leadership team to sort of delay the start of construction to secure financing. You all can appreciate our charitable gifts for the project are going to come in over 3 years, but all the construction costs happen in 1 year. So we have to secure financing to pay our construction bills. Originally, the offer that was made to us was going to add a lot of long-term operating costs to the church. And so we delayed pursuing that because we weren't thrilled, or we didn't know that that was the best offer that we could get. So we took a little time, and it's a good thing that we did, because both because of just God providentially dropping some things in our laps that we did not see coming. And also because some people on our building team have been working very hard to pursue and secure some unique financing options, we have a much, much better deal now on the table that's going to save us a lot of money in the next 5 years in terms of operating costs. So what that means, though, is construction is probably not going to start for at least another couple weeks, which means the odds of it being done by the end of the calendar year are looking pretty slim at this point. It's possible it still will. Maybe things will just go swimmingly and we'll still be in by the end of the year. Merry Christmas to us if that happens. But it's probably not going to happen at this point. So probably good that we all just begin to temper our expectations there. So the bad news is we're going to be here probably a little longer, but it's not like we're slumming it. This is a pretty cool space. So if we have to be here for a few more months or 2 more months or whatever the case might be, it's not a bad deal, right? But we thought as a leadership team, it was a lot more fiscally responsible to delay things on the front end, risk having to be here a little longer if it's going to save us a truckload of money in the long run. And so that's what we did. So you can expect to see, like equipment on the property and like stuff happening, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But that's going to mean we're probably going to be here after the end of the year, which is not what we hoped for, but it is what it is. So we'll brace that pain. And that, at the end of the day, that's not terrible, right? But we also need to embrace the pain of needing to raise some more money. So when we started this project 2 years ago, the estimated cost of the project was between $1.75 and $1.85 million. We first presented that to the congregation in November of 2022. We then spent 4 months in 2023 holding small group meetings in homes and in the church to get kind of pre-pledge estimates from people, basically as a way of discerning, do you want to do this? And if you remember all the way back in that November, if you were here, I said, look, we're going to do this together or we're not. We're going to hold a bunch of meetings. We're going to invite you in. We're going to ask if you want to give to this, if you want to support it. And if you don't, then we're just not going to do it. Well, those initial pre-pledge estimates came back between $1.4 and $1.6 million. So from our perspective, $1.4 to $1.6 million in estimated revenue, that indicated to us pretty strong support of the project, for the project. It also represented for us a pretty sober financial move. I mean, even a worst case scenario, if we only raise 1.4 and the project costs 1.85, we can handle that balance as a mortgage, no problem as a church. And we were prepared to do that. Well, that was 2 years ago. And as I'm sure you can all imagine, because you feel it every time you go to the grocery store and the gas pump, things have just gotten more expensive, including building materials and labor. So the guaranteed maximum price for this project is now right around $2 million. Guaranteed max means cannot exceed. It doesn't mean it's going to cost that, just that it can't cost more than that. But it could cost that. On the other side of that equation, when we did our official pledge campaign, the actual pledge numbers came back at just under 1.4 million. Came in at 1.36. So the gap that was looking like it'd be 450 is now much larger. And just to be clear, we've burnt the boats. We're building the church. It's going to happen. Like 10 months from now, we will leave this place and we will move back to that building. But the question now becomes, what kind of operating position are we going to find ourselves in when we go back there? We really need to close this gap. And that's the pain that I'm asking us to face and embrace this morning as a church. Now, our team has been hard at work closing the gap by trying to cut costs, by modifying the project aesthetically, by doing some of our own labor. And we'll continue to do that as those opportunities are available to us. So we'll continue to try to cost engineer as much as we can. There are some contingency line items in the budget that if they're not needed, that'll bring the actual cost down. But we're just not going to close the gap by cutting costs. The reality is we have to raise more money. Now, let me just empathize with how that sounds. I understand that you're living in a world where everything's more expensive and you're feeling the pinch, and it feels like every time you turn the corner, somebody else is asking for more. I get that. So this is probably hard to hear in that regard. I understand that. I also understand that thus far, everything about this project has been like, cool, this is super fun and exciting. And this probably feels a little bit like we're taking some of the air out of the balloon, and I know that that's probably hard to hear. I know many of you made real sacrifices to be able to give to this project in a way that you otherwise would not have been able to, that you've already chosen to embrace some pain. And this could sound like I'm saying to you, you didn't do enough. And so I know that that's hard to hear. I feel those things too. Carrie and I made a pretty significant pledge to this project. So now we're in the same chair as you're in, having to think about, okay, we're not going to close the gap by cutting costs. We have to raise more money, and there's no way to do that without some people willing to do more than they've already done. That's just the reality of it. So the goal is an additional $200,000. If we're able to do that, it'll put us right back in a place that we'll be in a very comfortable operating position moving forward. So let me talk to 4 groups of people that I think can help close the gap and raise the additional capital that we need. Group 1 are people who a year ago made a pledge. They pledged what they knew they could give, but they always hoped or planned to give more if either there was a need or if their financial situation changed in such a way that made that possible. Well, there's a need. And it just so happens that in the last 2 years, the market's been pretty good, up about 10%. So that means if you made a pledge of $10,000 on $100,000 of invested assets in 2022, the market has already paid you back. So if you find yourself in group 1, and I know there are people in this category because people came to me and said this. If you're in group 1 where you made a pledge a year ago and that pledge represented what you knew you could give, but in the back of your mind or in your heart, you always hoped or planned to make an additional gift if there was a need or if you could, I'm just telling you there's a need. So if you find yourself in a financial position where you can, the church could use that additional support. That's group 1. Group 2, I think Carrie and I probably put ourselves in group 2. Group 2 are the people who made a pledge and they agreed to give money over 3 years. They could increase that pledge. They could give more if they were allowed to stretch it into a 4th or even 5th year. We didn't organize the giving campaign this way because there's a lot of research to suggest that you lose a lot of momentum over 5 years as opposed to 3. And I want to be very clear, I am not saying that we can all just take our pledge and now spread it over 5 years instead of 3. What I am saying is that if you are in a position to give more to the building project, but to do that, you need an additional year or an additional 2 years, the church could use that support. So if you made a $15,000 pledge, you plan to give $5,000 a year for 3 years, but now that you know there's a need, and now that you know, or you've gotten adjusted to kind of a different financial rhythm or financial reality, and you could give another $5,000 in year 4 or even in year 5, I'm inviting you to do that. The church could use that extra support. So that's group 2. Groups 3 and 4, I'm just going to level with you, are harder to talk to because there's just more chance of offense. And so I'm going to say what I'm about to say with as much maternal sensitivity as I have, which Carrie would tell you is not much. Group 3 are people who pledged nothing to this project, but had no financial reason they couldn't. I understand. We have some people in our church who just financially could never give to this. They're just not in a position to do that. But I also think we probably have some people in our church who could shoulder the financial weight of this project, but are simply choosing not to. Not because financially they can't, but because they have some other reason for not. You might be sitting in the room and saying, well, Mike, I didn't want this project. This wasn't up to me. If it were up to me, we wouldn't have done this. I don't think the church needs to do this. I think this is unnecessary. That's why I'm not giving to it. Or any other host of reasons that are non-financial. I want you to know I hear that and I respect it. I do. At the same time, your church has decided to do something. And if you're here and you call this church your home and you love this church and you believe in its mission, then you need to trust the people who have made the decisions to do this. And you need to join your brothers and sisters in doing what most of them have done and participating. To sit out, to let everybody else shoulder the weight, and then to reap the benefits when it's all done is not love. So if you're in the room and you could make a contribution to this project, but you haven't, but there's no financial reason you haven't, I'm asking you to support the project. To do what lots of other people have done is give sacrificially as much as you can, as soon as you can. Group 4 are people who made a pledge. They pledged to support the project, but if they're being honest, if they look in the mirror in their heart of hearts and they're the only ones who will know, it wasn't sacrificial. Meaning it was more of a concession than it was a sacrifice. Like they wanted to participate because they knew they were supposed to. They didn't want to feel like they weren't doing anything. But they didn't really have to go without anything or didn't have to do anything extra in order to make that happen. So while their brothers and sisters are giving stuff up or doing something extra and really kind of feeling the weight of that, embracing the pain, they're giving, but they're giving in a way that it doesn't really hurt much. Now, I have a hunch that this is disproportionately true of people my age. So I just turned 44. For those of you who are older than I am, I'm guessing at some point you found yourself in a room and you looked around and you went, shoot, I'm the oldest person in the room. I'm the elder statesperson. I'm the senior person in this space. And you realized it's kind of on me to make stuff happen. I have found that my generation, as I just live and operate and talk with people and live life with people that are in my kind of sphere of life, we seem to be a little more reluctant to embrace that fact. It's like we still think our parents are the ones who are going to keep taking care of stuff like this, and we don't have to. We've even invented a term for it. We call it adulting. Do you know that you've seen this term? You've heard this term? It's like my parents are permanent adults. They live in an adult world and do adult things. I will sometimes step into the world of adult to do things that pertain to adult life, but then I will back out of that world so that I can still be a college kid in my mind. And other people will make the sacrifices necessary to take care of things like this. Maybe it's I'm 44 and I'm just in that season of life, but I'm looking around at my world and I'm thinking, man, how blessed have I been? Churches, schools, parks, libraries, museums, hospitals. I didn't build any of them, but I have been blessed by all of them. And now I'm at a place where I'm in my mid-40s and I'm looking at a world and I'm going, it is now my job to make sure that churches and hospitals and parks and libraries and museums are here. And if I do not structure my life in such a way that I can give sacrificially to make sure that those institutions are here and thriving, they will die, and it will have been my fault. It's not a generation above me that is responsible for doing those things anymore. It is my responsibility. And I have a hunch that there are a lot of people in my season of life who live in nicer houses than my parents lived in, who drive way nicer cars than my parents drove, who take trips my parents never took, who own things my parents couldn't have owned. And I don't know that we've structured our lives in such a way to be able to give sacrificially the way that we should. I understand that that is a very hard thing to hear. When we talk about giving sacrificially relative to what you have, well, relative to what you have is based on 1,000 other decisions you've already made, many of which could be very foolish. I have no idea. So I'm just telling you where I am in my life, being in my mid-40s, thinking, hey, this is on me now. There's no golden parachute above me that does this stuff. Either I give to it so that these things are alive and they're thriving, or they're going to die. And that's going to be on me. If you find yourself in any one of those groups, I'm just telling you we need to raise $200,000 of additional money. So that when this project is done and we move out of this space and we move back in over there and we've got this wonderful church to live in, that we don't find ourselves in an operating situation that's unhealthy and unsustainable. I don't know a single mom who would look at the future of her children and say, boy, I hope my kids have it worse than I did. We don't want to have a nice new building and then leave the next generation of our church to be worse off than we are. So if you find yourself in any one of those groups, I'm just asking you to consider increasing your gift. I know that's hard. We have embraced the pain to get this far. And I want to make sure I'm very clear how grateful I am that you've done that. You know, raising a $1.36 million, that's no small thing. That's a big deal. So you've embraced some pain to get us this far. I'm just asking you to embrace a little more. So that 25 years from now, we're still here, we're still carrying the positive faith, we're still birthing it into the world, and we're still nurturing it into maturity. We're going to finish our service this morning by taking communion together. You know, every week when we take communion and you come forward and you take the bread that represents Jesus' broken body and the juice that represents his shed blood, you are being reminded that the God that you believe in, the God that you worship, the God that you say you love, is a God who even before the creation, even before the beginning of time, embraced in himself the pain of love. The pain of creation, the pain of birthing life into people, and the pain of nurturing it up into maturity, and still does. That is most acutely seen on the cross, but that is who God is. But when you take those elements, you are also agreeing to participate in the life of that God. To leave this place and to go out into the world and to be a part of people, a group of people, a special community that says, for the sake of the world that God so loves, we are going to face and embrace the pain. That's who we are and that's who we'll be. If that's who you want to be, if that's the life that you want, then come forward, come to the table. That's what the church is. That's what you're invited into. If you've not done this with us before, in just a minute, I'll have you stand. I'll dismiss you starting in the back rows. Just come down our center aisle. Our communion tables are on the sides of the stage here. I ask that you take a prepackaged communion cup back to your seat using the side aisles, and then you can take it during this last song as you feel led. Let's embrace the pain together. I invite you to stand. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you. We thank you that you have created us in love, that you have been nothing but faithful to us in our lives. We thank you for all of the good things that we have. We thank you for the pain that you have embraced to love us, to care for us, to nurture us up into maturity, to call us into a life of love. I pray this morning that we surrender ourselves to you in new ways. We give our lives to you, that we place practical trust in your love for us and your promise to provide. We thank you for the gift of the church that has carried and birthed and nurtured faith in us. Pray that we would be that church for others. We love you. We surrender ourselves to you this morning. We ask that as we come forward to take the bread and the juice, that you continue to do a good work in us, that through us, for the world you so love, we might be your children and your servants. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Led me through the fire, and I